You are listening to The Rant.
I am not going to have time to screw any of my wives today.
You are listening
Please go away for the love of God!
to The Rant.
Are you listening to a word I'm saying?
The last thing I want to be remembered as is an annoying blabbermouth.
How do we laugh? We laugh politely. Ha ha ha.
You are listening to The Rant with David King.
Oh, boys! I'm back!
Sorry to keep you waiting, complicated business.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Rant. I'm your host, David King. It's good to be here with you. We're back in the saddle. It's been a little bit of a break. Sorry to keep you waiting, everybody. Complicated business. I apologize. I love doing this. Oh, it's good to be back here on this Saturday, May 2nd. It's already May. It's already May. Holy smokes, man. Where's the year 2026 going to? You know, I watched a YouTube video yesterday. This is kind of an off-topic comment, but I watched a YouTube video. It was short. It's like a 6-minute video. This guy was talking about why does it feel like time has sped up? And he made a good point, which was like, you know, as we get older, time does kind of go faster, right? We're busier. We're kind of going around. A lot of us have kids. I don't, but, you know, you're going to sports. You're going to band practice, cheerleading, whatever. So you're kind of running around a little bit. Things speed up. Go here, go there, do this, do that, work here. And it just kind of naturally happens. Also, like, someone made a really good point to me a while back, which I thought was interesting, which was like time, our interpretation of time changes. Because like when you're a kid, like let's say you're 6 years old. Well, you've only been on the planet for like 6 years, right? So like your idea or your perception of time is different than when you've been on the earth for 60 years, right? It's like why kids often feel impatient, because everything feels like it takes forever as a kid. Because you've not been on the, like they say, well, it's because you've not been around long enough. And maybe that's it. I don't know. But like, I do notice in my adult years, you feel like, well, you know, oh, you got to wait 30 minutes for, it doesn't seem like eternity when you have to wait 30 minutes for something. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I got to wait 30 minutes for a doctor. I got to wait 30 minutes for a table at the restaurant. It's not so bad. But when you're a kid, like 30 minutes feels like eternity. But anyway, he was making this point that like since 2020, it feels like we're in warp speed. Like it's just going like crazy. And he said, you know, when he had gotten in a motorcycle accident and he got hit from behind and like threw him off his bike. And he said, like, I can remember when I was airborne. And I was flying through the air, and it felt like I was flying through the air for like minutes. It was like seconds, you know, like I was in the air and on the ground within seconds, but it felt like I was in the air for minutes. And he's like, why does that feel that way? And he realized that there's a psychological response to this with your brain, that your head, like your brain, when it's in fear mode, right? When you're in this like sense of, uh-oh, something's wrong and I'm, you know, in danger and I've got to kind of like react to save my life, it naturally kind of slows things down a little bit, right? We kind of seen that in movies where it's like the guy's like hyper-focused and everything just kind of slows down. You know, you see it in like sports movies a lot. And that makes sense because we've all kind of been there, right? Like we've all been in like everything, like you've been in like a very scary situation and it kind of feels like things slow down a little bit. So he was thinking about this and he did a little research and he found out that while fear, that sort of fight or flight mode, maybe not necessarily that, but that fear of like, oh, survival mode's up, let's go, slows things down a little bit. The opposite is true for anxiety. If you're anxious, things speed up. And we're more anxious now as a society than we ever have been in the history of probably the human civilization. And I thought to myself, man, that is profound, and it's so true. That we have so many things that give us anxiety that we don't even realize give us anxiety. We find out that if you're somebody who likes to scroll on your phone, if you're one of those doom scrollers, I do that from time to time. I get caught up in it. I'm not going to lie, I do it. X is like, you want to get into the doom scroll, go on X for a while. But apparently that raises your anxiety. It does something to you. I don't know if it's because like it's almost like you're on a drug. You want more, like you want that content, but it raises your anxiety levels. We're seeing this in teenage kids too, especially because they are the ones who are doing the doom scrolling the most. They're locked in on the phones. Kind of reminds me, I drove by a school bus stop in the morning, and it was probably one of the saddest things I've ever seen. Like the kids just all looked sad and miserable and disconnected. And like, look, I remember being a kid. I hated school. I still hate school. That's why I never went to college. I mean, I went to a community college for like a year and a half, and I hated it. But I get it. Like it's the morning. You don't want to be there. You're miserable. There's that look. Like we know that look. You know the look of somebody who's like, oh, I'm tired. I don't want to be here today. I'm just trying to get through it. And then there's like the people who are just completely disconnected. They look sad. They look like they're hanging on by a loose tooth. You know what I'm saying? And that's how these kids looked. Another thing too, like when I was a kid, when you go to the bus stop, for those of you who took the bus to school, like so many kids today don't. Their parents like pick them up and drop them off. I'm like, must be nice. I had to ride the bus and get in fights, get picked on. But it must be nice to be able to have your mommy take you to school every day. By the way, why is that a thing now? Like it's too much. It's blocking traffic. When you have to have a cop, direct traffic because your all these like helicopter parents want to make sure their little babies get to school safe. Anyway, my parents went to work and I had to walk my butt to school, to the school bus stop. And you either got there or you didn't. You better hope to God you got there, because if you missed the bus, boy, you were in for a whooping. Anyway, when I would go to the bus stop in the morning, we would talk to one another, right? Like there was engagement. We all might be kind of tired and lethargic because we stayed up too late playing video games, playing that new Nintendo 64, baby. What? But we would talk to one another. We'd laugh and make jokes. Some people get bullied. It was fun. It was a good time. We were engaged. We were locked in. And you look at these kids now and they're like soulless, man. There's like nothing going on. They don't even look at each other. They're just like looking at the ground. Look sad. And it was just a depressing thing to see. Like their anxiety is clearly high. Like everybody's anxiety is through the roof. And that's probably why time feels like it's flying by. And I thought about it for myself. And I said, yeah, that makes total sense. And the guy made a point in the video. He's like, the social media raises anxiety. Why? Because we're constantly inundated with whatever's going on in the world. You can't turn on the news without knowing what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Russia, what's going on in Europe. Europe's thinking about separating from one another, or all these Muslims are invading Europe. It's the end of Europe as we know it. Like there's always some sort of conflict going on in the world, and it's being shoved in our faces constantly. And then you're getting the same thing just in our domestic situation. We're always got every year, man. It doesn't matter who's in office. There's a political rally, a No Kings event again. I'm like, why? We're having a No Kings event again? I didn't know we were still on that topic. I thought we had moved on. Like, nope, it's the yearly No Kings rally. It's going to be nationwide. Cool. Thought we kind of fixed the king problem back in 1775, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Somebody did make a very funny point when King Charles came to America to visit just recently, that the Democrats were all too happy to stand up and applaud the things that he said. But it was ironic because they're the ones who are leading the No Kings event, and yet they stood and applauded a king. That just goes to show you the hypocrisy of what we're dealing with in this world. Listen, we're inundated with so many problems. You know, back in the day, like, you think about like what our parents grew up with. You know, I'm 37 years old. My parents are in their 60s. My dad's in his 70s. Let's go. Come on, baby. Boomer. You know, they had the newspaper. They had local news. And that was probably it. They might, you know, the only thing you would see on, you know, major news, this is pre-CNN, is pre-24-hour news, is you probably would get like, there was a hijacking in the Middle East again. This was Walter Cronkite, or however he talked. But all the media people talked like this. It was always like that. There was a plane hijacking in the Middle East. Now, back to local news. It's like, that was it. You're like, oh man, that's terrible. Hope everybody's okay. You know what I mean? You know, you might get a glimpse of like, even like the wars, man. Like the news in World War II. If you wanted to know what was going on in the Eastern Front, well, you pretty much had to go read your newspaper. You might see an article about it. You know, it might be like, D-Day was a success, blah, 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 whatever. And then, you know, you might catch a little propaganda video before a movie or something. But for the most part, like, the coverage was even light on that. So my point is, like, we are constantly obsessing over things. And the guy made the point, which was so smart. Like, you obsess over things that you have no control over. And I'm like, damn, that's so true. I'm guilty of it. You know, I come on this podcast and talk about stuff I have no control over either. You know what I'm saying? I think that's kind of like the whole point of, like, when we get into politics on this podcast, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. We're just kind of on here talking about it, complaining. So it's something to think about in your life. If you take anything away from this podcast, which has nothing to do with politics today, thank God. People are riding little mini bikes in my neighborhood. You might be able to hear it right now. Oh, if you take anything away from it, maybe it's that put the phone down for a while, you know, turn off the news, go outside, smell the air, garden, do something. But, you know, get away from all the constant, just the constant, man. And it's hard. It's really hard. It's easy to get very addicted to your phone. Golly, the phone, like the iPhone is like the greatest, worst thing that ever happened to humans. The smartphone, iPhone. Holy smokes, Batman. Boy, was it bad. But anyway, let's move on to the topic of this conversation. We're already like literally 13 minutes into this podcast and we haven't even gotten to what I actually wanted to have this show about. You know.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
No, I don't. I have no idea. We're rambling at this point. The show is just off the rails, folks. We got to back it up. Anywho, if you're a sports fan like me and you watch TV and you've been watching the news, too much of it, you might have heard that LIV Golf is probably going away at the end of the year. Now, of course, the news article actually reads that the PIF, the private equity or private, what does the PIF freaking stand for? Now I'm having a brain fart. Here we go. Look, I get into public investment fund. Thank you. Holy smokes. We're going to get through it, everybody. We're going to get through this together. Anywho, the public investment fund, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, was the main financial backer of LIV Golf. Now, let me give you a little. LIV Golf was founded, at this point, it's been around for quite a while. I believe it was right after 2020. The tournament, it was founded in 2021 and it officially launched its inaugural season in June of 2022. So we've been in it for a little while now. And the PIF was the main backer of this whole thing. It's really the reason why LIV had any legs to begin with, because everybody knows in any sport, it doesn't matter what it is, you got to have money, right? Because you got to pay the players, you got to pay for venues, you've got it is a serious financial investment. And LIV came along for many reasons. Okay, it had a lot of reasons for why it was created. For Greg Norman, it was a way to essentially go after the PGA. He has a little bit of bad blood with the PGA. I don't really know the ins and outs of that. I'm sure his reasonings for not liking the PGA. And listen, I'm just speculating here at this point. I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason. We could Google it. I mean, here, I'll pull it up right now. Maybe we know why does Greg Norman hate the PGA? Greg Norman's antipathy toward the PGA Tour stems from a long-standing desire to break its monopoly on professional golf. Okay, so that's exactly what I was actually going to say. I think Greg Norman's disdain for the PGA Tour is probably no different than a lot of other players. The other players maybe just don't say it as loud. It's kind of the quiet elephant in the room that we all kind of know about, which is, and this is part of the reason why LIV came along, and I think it was a benefit for LIV, was the PGA, it's not a monopoly because, yeah, you get the DP World Tour, you have the Asian World Tour, but it's still a monopoly. You know, as much as like the NFL is a monopoly over football, of pro football, right? You have the Canadian League and you have these other kind of breakaway leagues that come up, that play off the season of the NFL. But for the most part, like nobody's coming in and doing a professional football league like the NFL, right? The one thing, so the PGA Tour has a very stronghold over golf, and it just makes sense. They've been around forever. They have all the money, they have all the connections, they have all the sponsors, they have all the players, they had everything. They had all the leverage, and I think that's the part that Greg Norman hated, was because it was pretty much this was basically it. If you don't like it here, you can leave. There's no, where are you going to go? You know what I mean? It's the hostile work environment that comes from the fact that your employer knows there's no better option out there for you. You know what I mean? You can't negotiate with me because I have all the leverage. I have all the, as Trump says, you ain't got any cards, no cards. I got all the cards. And that's what the PGA Tour was. They had all the cards. And so that's kind of where I empathize with that. And I know people are like, oh, poor, pitiful golfers. It's like, no. Let's take a step back for a minute. Let's look at the PGA. Like the one thing I will say about LIV is the LIV Golf Tour taught me a lot about how pro golf works. Things that I didn't know about. I watched pro golf. I love watching golf tournaments. I had no idea, how the system or how that ecosystem worked. And when you kind of look at it, you go, damn, that's a tough gig. When you look at an NFL player, we've talked about it on the show before. When you look at like an NFL player, a baseball player in the MLB, basketball, look at the major sports, hockey. These guys play hockey, they play football, and they have a contract, they have a deal. It's usually over a course of, so many years with that team, and they're going to get paid to play no matter what the outcome is. So if a hockey player goes and joins a team and he doesn't do very well, but he fulfills his contract, he still gets paid, right? Now he could get traded, but he's still getting paid while he's with the team. Whether they win a championship or don't win a championship, whether the game is won or lost, they still get paid. Now, we've all kind of made comments that it would be kind of nice maybe if they don't get paid. If we've all had like these conversations where maybe the players, especially like in the NFL, would get paid based on their performance, right? Maybe you still get paid, but you get paid more if you win, kind of thing. And some of that might be in contracts too. But in the world of golf, first off, you got to make a cut. All right. For those of you who don't watch golf, there is the PGA Tour. You have 4 days. You have 4 days of a tournament, 4 days of 18-hole golf, 72 holes from Thursday to Sunday. Sunday's the final round. Thursday's the first round. The first 2 rounds, Thursday and Friday, are the pre-cut rounds. Okay, you have to basically, you have to finish within a certain number, and that number changes. It depends on how the field in general is playing. If the field is not doing very well, that rank might slide back higher. But if the field is doing really well, the cut line might be a little tighter. And I think it depends on the tournament, but it's like you start off with like over 100 players, and then some tournaments it's like you only have 70 players afterwards, or 60 or 50 or whatever. So I know some majors are that way. The point is like if you don't play well Thursday and Friday and you don't make the cut, you don't get to play on Saturday and Sunday, and that also means you don't make any money on that tournament. So your airfare, and here's another thing, you have to travel. That's another unique thing about golf, is there's no real home venues for golf, unless of course you live in like, say, Atlanta, and you're playing at Augusta for the Masters. That could be considered like a home game because you could drive there. But the reality is most of these guys don't live anywhere near where they're playing most of the time. So they have to fly there. They have to get a hotel or a house to rent. A lot of guys rent houses and stay in the same house. You got your food. You can eat at the golf course, but you also are going to have times where you're not at the golf course. So there's all the food, lodging, travel expenses that go along with you going to the tournament. That's on you, right? You have to pay for that. And you're thinking like, oh, poor, pitiful golfers, they're millionaires. It's like, no, not all of them. The top, it's very simple. They broke it down. I think Bryson DeChambeau actually talked about it too a little bit. Basically, like if you're not in the top 100, you're struggling to make money. Like you're hurting. You're running on fumes because you're not making the money. You're not making cuts. You're relying solely on whatever sponsorships you may have. They're not going to be very good because you're not top 100. So that's an interesting dynamic to golf. And look, I get it. Like people don't, it's crocodile tears for these people that make millions of dollars playing a sport. But the thing with golf is like, it's not like the NFL where like you hear these guys get drafted out of college and they're getting, $1 million deals and it's guaranteed money. They're set. It's not like that with golf. First off, that's another thing. Getting into the PGA Tour is incredibly difficult. There's only so many cards that are available. Most guys go college, right? They start off in high school. They get good enough to go to college. If they do well in college, maybe they go to Q school, or maybe they can skip Q school, go to the Korn Ferry Tour. Korn Ferry Tour is sort of like the minors to the PGA Tour. And you got to do really well at the Korn Ferry and hopefully earn your PGA card to get you to the PGA Tour. But you're not making much money, right? You're making enough probably to get by, get your bills paid, get your travel paid, your food, airfare, lodging, if you're doing well enough. But you're not well off by any stretch of the imagination. And so it's a struggle to get there. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of gambling. As I like to say, it's a gamble. You don't know if you're going to be successful or not. You have no idea what's going to happen. And so that's the way it is. And the PGA Tour is like, there you go, right? So it's difficult, and the players hate it. Everybody can talk about like, and this was a common thing with the cut. Like I always think cuts were kind of dumb. If the PGA Tour got rid of cuts, I wouldn't care. I don't think it changes the game at all. A lot of guys will say, "Oh, it's so important to have cuts because that adds to the drama. Like, what if you don't make it? Like, you got to try really hard. Some of these guys, they're not even just trying to win; they're trying to make that cut, and that just adds to it. It's like it doesn't add anything. You know what it does? It because golf is a single sport. It's not a team sport. We'll get to that here in a minute. We'll talk about the team aspect of it with LIV later. But golf is an individual sport. Golf is probably, depending on who you talk to and ask, it could be, people say it's 80% mental, right? I think that was pretty obvious for Bryson DeChambeau at the Masters this year. Bryson just came off of like 2 wins on LIV he was looking so good. Everybody was like, man, Bryson looks really good. He's a favorite for Augusta. He doesn't make the cut. He didn't make the cut. And that's golf. Golf is, a lot of it's mental. You have good days, you have bad days. Every professional golfer will tell you it is very hard to win a golf tournament. It's why these guys are just like so excited when they win just like a regular old tournament. Yeah, the money, obviously, but it just feels good to win because you don't. Most of the time you're not. You're not winning every week. You're hardly ever winning. And that's a weird thing too. You know, at least if you're playing on a football team, you're going to win at least, you know, maybe 8 games. You know, you're going to win something, even the worst teams. I mean, there are teams out there that don't win. That's an anomaly. You get what I'm saying. In most sports, you have some wins. Makes you feel good. Get you back in the saddle. In golf, you rarely win because it is very difficult. It is hard to win in golf. So it's a mental game in and of itself. I don't think you need cuts to add to that. Like, it doesn't change anything. What it does is that when you're a golfer has a bad day, like Bryson did at the Masters, it means Bryson's not playing on Saturday, which means if you had Saturday tickets to the Masters and you were so excited because you're going to go follow Bryson DeChambeau and now you can't follow him. And to me, all that does is just punish the fan. Like, yeah, Bryson's not going to win because he's like T60. Okay. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm a fan of Bryson DeChambeau and I'm here at 9 a.m. at the Masters and he happens to be teeing off. I'm going to go follow him for 9 holes and see one of my favorite golfers. You know what I'm saying? Like, that to me is why I don't care. Like, get rid of it. Get rid of the cut. The cut's stupid. And it's penalizing younger players who are just trying to get a standing. Now so there's that aspect to it, and I'm chasing some rabbits here, but we'll get back into everything. Now, so the LIV tournament, like I said, it was created for many reasons. Okay. For Greg Norman, this was a way to sort of attack the PGA. Okay. For him, it was personal. He's like, I'm tired of their monopoly. I'm tired of the way they're so controlling. They dominate this market all throughout the world. You know, he feels that they're restrictive, they're anti-competitive, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. For the Saudis who got into financing this deal, it's very clear for them, they're trying to break their way into the world of golf. They couldn't just go to the PGA. The PGA wasn't interested because, let's face it, Saudi Arabia has sort of a black kind of tarnished history. Okay. Human rights violations, things like that. And that was a huge problem for a lot of people. And I covered that in this podcast before. I said, if you have an issue, what they called it sports washing, that Saudi Arabia is trying to improve their image by investing in sports and making themselves look better. Okay, whatever. Maybe they are. Maybe the leadership in Saudi Arabia is like, hey, we're tired of, we're not those people anymore. The people that funded terrorism or, committed human rights violations, whatever. We're trying to get away from that. We're trying to rebuild our image. We're trying to repent, if you will. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. It did spark a lot of interesting debate amongst people where people go, well, if you support LIV, then you're obviously a hypocrite because 9/11. I'm like, I'm sorry, who did we go to war with? I thought Al Qaeda was behind 9/11. You're telling me it was Saudi Arabia? Well, we didn't go to war with Saudi Arabia. Oh, those guys were all Saudis on the plane. They funded it. I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. I have no physical proof that they did or didn't. Here's my argument. I've always made this argument about everything. You have these 9/11 survivors, who are upset about this. Were upset about this, and they protested it when it happened, when this league started. And look, they have every right to protest. I'm not going to take anything away from them. They have every right to be upset. They have every right to say, screw this. We don't like Saudi Arabia because 9/11. We lost family members on 9/11. Totally understand it. Totally empathize with that. And that's their right to to be like, screw that. We're not going to watch it. Nobody else should watch it because of who funds it. Okay, fair enough. I hear what you're saying. I don't agree. I was going to watch it. Didn't care. And here's the reason why. One of the persons said, how could you stand by and support a league that's funded by people who commit human rights violations? And I say to that, how can you do what you do and say that? Because here's the deal. We don't have the luxury of picking and choosing who we support based off of their actions. What do I mean? We have a global economy, okay? Used to be a time where the economy was mainly in the United States. There was trade, for sure, but most of our goods and things that we bought, things that were made in the United States. And that was that. Well, we have a global economy now. Most of the stuff that we purchase is not made in the United States. It's made in other countries. And so the woman who is screaming that you shouldn't watch golf because it's funded by people who commit human rights violations is wearing a hat that's been embroidered with her slogan to protest LIV, but she's wearing a hat that was likely made in China in a sweatshop or in a sweatshop-like conditions. China has committed so many human rights violations. Their standard of living is so poor, their working hours are so ridiculous that they put suicide nets around the windows of their buildings so employees can't jump out and kill themselves. That should tell you everything you need to know about what it's like to live there and work there. And yet, you're wearing clothing made in that country. You drive a car that has products made by factories in that country. You have a house that has appliances with products and materials that were made in that country. Now, I'm not telling you that you should, stop driving a car, stop making coffee, get rid of your refrigerator, whatever. I'm not saying any of that. My point is this is why I don't protest or boycott things like that. Because if you want to be consistent, then you're going to end up basically being naked in the woods, by yourself. Because everything you touch has a direct connection to a country that does things that we don't agree with. And the irony of this whole argument about the PIF was that 25 of the top companies that were sponsors of the PGA Tour, because the PGA Tour is we would never take the money from the PIF. We would never take that blood money. We're better. Hoity-toity. That was the argument they made. Well, guess what? Your top 25 of your biggest sponsors on the PGA Tour have direct relations with Saudi Arabia. Some of them have a headquarters, a Middle Eastern headquarters, a building there where they do operations on that side of the planet. Some of them have dealerships or whatever. And they make money off the Saudis, and then they take that money and they give it to you. It's no different. My point to that is it was a stupid argument. And it's one where you kind of go, well, if you want to be consistent, you're going to have to stop doing all these other things, and you're not going to. And the reality is that this is where we get to the point of this whole podcast. Where did LIV Golf go wrong? Why did LIV Golf fail? Now, again, technically, it's not going away. It's just that the PIF is no longer funding the LIV Tour at the end of the year 2026. So 2026 is the last year that the PIF is going to fund the LIV Tour. Now, everybody is saying that means it's the death of LIV. Now, it's likely true because LIV is a cash cow. It is expensive to run. And they're not going to have they're not going to be able to get corporate sponsorships to cover the costs. It's going to take serious changes. It's very likely that LIV is going to go away. And I kind of went long-winded again to get to this point, and I've covered some of the things. So let's just talk about right away why LIV failed and what LIV could have done differently, in my opinion. So in this podcast, I'm talking about why LIV failed and what I think LIV could have done to be more successful. Now, we started off with saying that LIV started for a lot of reasons. Greg Norman wanted to have a rival league that kind of cut the legs out from the PGA. The Saudis, they wanted to get involved in the world of golf. They wanted to sports wash themselves, whatever, don't care, but they wanted to get into the world of golf. They're trying to get into sports to improve their image. For the players, this was an opportunity to go do what they love to do, which is play golf and actually be able to make money doing it on a much better schedule. It would be maybe a little easier to make money that's more sustainable, right? Because what LIV offered to the players, and this is important because we talked about the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour, you had four-day tournament, right, with a cut. Well, in the LIV tournament, it's only 3 days and there is no cut. Everybody plays, everybody finishes, everybody gets paid. You get paid something. Now, this was, again, part of the criticism, mainly from, let's get into the criticism real quick. I don't want to get too far into another rabbit hole here. But one of the biggest things that caused LIV to not launch the way it should have was, let's just call a spade here. It was the boomer Gen Xers were the biggest hurdle for LIV. The boomers and the Gen Xers are diehard PGA guys. LIV Golf was, it was loud, right? There was music on every hole. There was a lot more cheering. It wasn't the sort of quiet gentleman's clapping, yes, very well. Good shot, chop. Good clap. None of that, right? That wasn't LIV's thing. LIV's thing was like golf but louder. That was kind of like their tagline. And when you watched their program on TV, it had a lot of graphics and it had a lot of animations. It was almost like you were kind of watching a video game in a way. And it actually, the funny thing about it is it reminded me of racing. I told it to my father-in-law, who's a sports writer. He's like, I don't understand this whole, like, I watched a LIV tournament on TV and he goes, all the graphics. He's like, I didn't understand any of the graphics. It was kind of hard to understand. And I said, really, it was? He goes, yeah, I just couldn't really follow it. It was weird. And then I realized, like, oh, I get it now. This is more for the video game generation, the younger people, your 30s and back. But also it was set up very much like auto racing. And it makes sense because the Saudis are heavily invested in F1. And in auto racing, you have like the individual driver, right? And then you have the team of drivers. So for those of you, just real quick, if you don't know how racing works, almost every major racing from IMSA to F1, even NASCAR to a degree, you have teams, right? And those teams are compiled of 1, 2 or 3 or 4 or however many cars that team runs. And in that car are individual drivers. And in some cases, there's more than one driver per car. I know it's complicated. But just the reason why I'm saying all this is because, like LIV, another major distinction between LIV and the PGA is that the PGA is just an individual sport. But LIV was trying to implement a team aspect to the game. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. So you had two things going on with LIV. You had the individual golfer, but then you also had the team that golfer played on. That's very much like auto racing. So you have the individual racer, the guy that's driving his car, he's trying to win the race, but you also have a team that he's racing for. And so he can win the race, but his teammate might come in fourth, right? But the way it works in auto racing is you're rewarded points based on where you finish. And however many points you have at the end of the season judges where you finish off in the season. So like 1 year in IMSA, Corvette was consistently finishing in second place, right? They were almost always finishing in second, maybe not necessarily winning, but they were so consistent that they garnered the points to win the championship, to win at the end of the season. They had the most points because they were the most consistently placing team, if that makes sense. Okay. So there's that aspect. You have the team points and the individual points, blah, blah, blah. That's how auto racing works. And LIV is very much like that. So if you follow those things, it didn't confuse you too much. But that was a problem for LIV And we'll get into that here in a minute. So there's the team aspect of all that. So the players, and because there was three rounds of golf, and another major distinction is, so you had 3 days of golf, no cut, compared to 4 days and a cut. But also in the PGA Tour, players go off at designated times. Usually, if you're in the top lead, right? So if you're the top 5 golfers, they will tee off last, and they usually tee off around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think it's 1 o'clock. Yeah, it'll go from noon to like 1 or 1:30. Okay. And then if you're at the bottom of the list, you're going to tee off real early in the morning. And many times you're going to either tee off on the front 9 or the back 9, right? That often happens too. It definitely happens in like the Champions Tour. And so in the LIV Tour, it was a shotgun start. Everybody played at the same time, and they started on a specific hole. So if you ever played like in a golf tournament, like a charity golf tournament with a shotgun start, sometimes you'll start on hole 9 or sometimes you'll start on hole 5, right? You just play all the way through until you get back to 5 and then you finish. That's how the LIV Tour was. That added to a lot of confusion, especially for the older generation, but also too for us. Like I would watch and be like, where are they at? They're through. It would say like 9 to go, 8 to go, 6 to go. How many holes are left to go, right? You're like, okay. So it was a little weird. And that was a problem. And, this was the biggest issue for LIV is they could not latch on to the older generation of golfers, right? And as much as golf loves to talk about how the game is growing, that is still the largest base for golf. It's the older, it's 50 and up. It's still very huge. Still, I would say the major demographic of people who watch golf on TV. That's changing, but here's the interesting thing about that. While golf is growing, where the eyeballs are is changing. YouTube Golf is the largest growing platform for golf right now. It's growing faster than the PGA Tour. In other words, more people are watching YouTube Golf than they are watching professional golf. And it's just skyrocketing. And I love YouTube Golf. I like watching Bob Does Sports. I like watching Bryson. I like all the other guys. They're fun to watch. Good Golf. Those were fun to watch. It's good. It's entertaining. It's more relatable in so many ways because it's like you're out there. It's like you're watching, how it is like with you and your boys if it was more organized. You know what I'm saying? It's not like just us going out and hitting balls into the woods. But anyway, I digress. That's skyrocketing. So the first thing that LIV did wrong, the two first things, we kind of got the reasons out of the way. And I do think the players, so many of the players in the PGA Tour wanted to go to LIV. They wanted to take that deal. They were excited. When LIV Golf came around and the purses were announced, how the format was going to be announced, and how players were going to get paid, and another thing too is how many tournaments there were per year. LIV Golf had far less tournaments than the PGA Tour. The thing about the PGA Tour is because of the difficulty of it, it's a grind. If you're not doing well, you got to go play more golf. You could be playing in 3 to 4 tournaments a month. Right? You could be going one after the other to keep up. It's a huge issue. It's one that's even Rory McIlroy brought up. He was one of the reasons why he kind of took a big break after winning the Masters last year. It's kind of why he was in a weird funk, was because he said, look, I was chasing my dream to get the Grand Slam. I've been wanting to win the Masters my entire life. I finally do it, and I had no time to just enjoy it. I had to it was like time to go to the next tournament. And he goes, honestly, it was a little frustrating. I had no time to really just soak it in. And then also on top of that, he was like, I've checked all the boxes. So now I'm kind of having a hard time figuring out the reason for why I'm hurrying off to the next tournament. Like, why am I not sitting at home and enjoying and relishing in this green jacket and enjoying my time with my family and celebrating this win? Like, why am I hurrying off to the next tournament? Like, what's the point? I've done everything. And he's right. He's won a FedEx Cup. He's done it all, and that's part of the problem with the PGA Tour is it's so grueling. And it's the same way for the Champions Tour as well. Like we just finished the Mitsubishi Electric Classic, and the guy won, and he had like no time to celebrate. He does all the media, the press, the interviews, the shaking of the hands, all the photos. He goes up to the clubhouse. He does a toast, does more photos, more shaking hands, signs everything, signs all the stuff that needs to be signed for the merchandise or whatever. And then he's like, I got to go catch my flight. I got to get to Alabama, the tournament for tomorrow. I've got a pro-am, blah, blah, blah. Got to go. And you're just like, damn, dude, you just won a golf tournament. You have no time to he's like, we'll be sipping champagne on the way there. It's like, damn, that's crazy. You get no time to really enjoy it. It is so hard to win in golf. And yet the damnedest thing of it all is you get no time to enjoy the wins when you do get them. And so that was part of it. And the players really, they wanted to go to this tournament for this league for that reason, because they would be able to enjoy the game of golf more. They'd have a better chance of making money and not have to worry about, if I don't play, if I have a bad stretch or a bad few months, am I not going to make any money? Some of this was good for the older players, like Phil Mickelson. Like let's say he's on the twilight years of his career. He's never going to make the big money. This was an opportunity for him to make great money and keep playing golf, more money he'd ever make on the Champions Tour. That's for damn sure. But because, and this to me was the biggest mistake LIV made to a degree. Greg Norman was the biggest mistake for LIV. I like Greg Norman. I got no beef with him. But because he sort of made this personal and a vendetta, you pair the fact that, one, Greg Norman was like, we're creating a league to rival the PGA, right? We're gonna cut the knees out from the PGA. That was red flag number one for them, for the PGA. Two, the PGA was like, holy shit, they just got literally a bottomless pit of cash. They'll have way more money than we'll ever have, right? Because the PIF is, they're trillionaires. They've got more money than you can ever imagine. More money than the PGA will ever get. So now the PGA is on full threat mode. They're seeing their best players mass exodus for the LIV. You're losing all the greats. At that time, okay, we got to go back 4 or 5 years, guys. Like, I know now you're like, man, these players suck, dude. Like, the only good one they got now is Bryson. It's like, yeah, that wasn't really the case back in 2021. I mean, you had Justin Thomas, or not Justin Thomas, JD, what was his name? Anyway, you had, Patrick Reed, Phil, Bryson, Cam Smith, all these players that were winning tournaments, they were winning majors, they were great golfers. Probably, the top 10, the PGA Tour lost so many of the top 10 golfers to the LIV. So now they're watching this going, oh shit. And all these other players are like, hey, I'm getting offers, I'm thinking about going. So what did they do? It became a war, right? And this was the worst thing that could happen to LIV. And you got the PGA Tour tapped into all of their friends, right? Wherever they could get an ally, they went there. Clearly, the Golf Channel was one of their biggest media allies that they could get. And of course, because the Golf Channel and the PGA are simpatico. I mean, let's face it, the Golf Channel doesn't exist without the PGA Tour. The Golf Channel doesn't want to only document the DP World Tour. They don't want to just document the Asian Tour. That doesn't do them any good because the Golf Channel is primarily focused on the United States and the golf there. So that's their biggest, that would be like saying ESPN, NBC, Fox, whoever, they don't want to ruffle the feathers of the NFL, right? They want to keep their NFL, they want their games because it's good for their business. You know what I mean? So Golf Channel was their biggest out. That was their biggest propaganda tool. So immediately when the LIV Tour was created, you had this sort of propaganda machine churning for the PGA Tour of mostly older men, Gen Xers and the Boomers that are on Golf Channel, all the Gen X Boomers on their podcasts or sports podcasts or sports channels. They were all firing whatever shots they could. They were laughing at the system, making fun of LIV, making fun of the way it was set up, no cuts. Oh, that's stupid. How can you not have any cuts? It's not a real tournament. Like, none of it made any sense. Nobody could really defend it, but it was working, right? It was starting to trickle down into my age group of people, of demographic. You started to see this rift create immediately. So LIV had this huge issue right at the beginning because the PGA was like, oh, this is an attack on us. And if we don't get ahead of this, they could really hurt hurt what we've created over the last 100 years. You know, everything that we built could be destroyed by this other tournament. Because they have the money and the backing to do it. And so the PGA cracked down. They created, if you go to LIV, you're not allowed to play in the PGA. I thought that was a horrible thing. It was really unfortunate. What LIV definitely did in this moment is it really did show that Greg Norman was right, that the PGA Tour did have a monopoly and a stronghold over the golf industry. They had a stronghold over the golf media. They had a stronghold over the players. And so, in a way, thank God they went this way, because what it did was it really put the pressure on the PGA to change. It finally gave the players the leverage that they needed. And I think the powers that be at the PGA Tour finally realized, like, all right, we're all going to have to sit at the table and figure this out if we want to keep moving forward, because otherwise, you know, the whole, like, if you go to LIV, you can't play here anymore. It's not going to really work, because if LIV does take off and the purses do remain the same and the structure remains the same, more players are going to be like, screw this, dude. I'm going to LIV because I can go make my bag. I can go play golf, make my money, and have a better shot of doing this for a living versus hoping I can do it for a living and not, whatever, with the PGA Tour. So the one weird sort of silver lining to that cloud was, yes, the LIV kind of went at this the wrong way by starting to be a little hostile. Like, Greg was a little hostile towards the PGA, but it did force the hand of the PGA to change. The PGA was starting to talk about guaranteed money, especially for certain players. Like, you're going to be guaranteed like $200,000 a season, right? So now, instead of like, I'm having a bad year, I'm not making cuts, I'm barely skimping by here, you know, I just joined the tour and the stress is getting to me, you know, well, now you know you're at least going to get a couple $100,000 to get you through the season. And that, yeah, you know, you go, wow, that's a lot of money. It's really not when you have to travel all over the freaking world to play golf. And you have to do it probably 3 or 4 times a month, right? So there's that, and then that worked. That propaganda media campaign really, really hurt LIV's launch. And that was something that they had to fight through for a while. And I think that was part of the reason why Greg Norman was pushed away, because I think the LIV Tour, as much as they were like, we're trying to fight the PGA, I do think after a while they're like, how can we work with the PGA? Because we're not going to be able to keep going on this sort of track. We can't keep fighting. Can't be in this war, right? Because while we're offering the money and the better schedules and stuff, the next biggest thing that hurt LIV was they couldn't get the player ranking points. It's an archaic system. I thought it was more politically driven. They said it wasn't. They said because of the setup, LIV doesn't qualify for world ranking points. Well, if you don't have world ranking points, then you can't play in the majors. Now, for those of you who don't know this, that major championships are separate of the PGA Tour. They're not part of the PGA Tour. So LIV players could still play in majors, which was awesome because that created some fun drama because you had these LIV guys showing up and doing pretty well. They didn't this year. But my point is, like, when the LIV couldn't get world ranking points, that sort of was the final nail in that coffin. We kind of all knew it. We said the quiet part out loud. I was like, that the PGA won the war, right? They couldn't win with money, but the PGA, what they did win was with media propaganda and just their overall footing. They have such a deep footing in this world of golf that they were able to really manipulate the world ranking points to say, like, yeah, we're not going to do it. And that was it. And it was just a matter of time. And so now here we are. PIF's pulling out. There's not going to be the money there anymore, and I'm sure it's going to fall apart. So what could LIV done differently? Let's bring this all home. Stop chasing the rabbits. Let's just figure out, like, what could LIV. I think LIV could have been a successful golf tournament, a golf league. And here's my opinion. The first thing they did wrong, and I've already said it, is that you should never have you should never went after the PGA. Greg Norman, for better or for worse, not a great guy to take on, to be your face of your new tournament. Again, it did change some things that I think were beneficial for the players. And maybe I'm wrong when I say, like, going after the PGA was a bad idea. It's kind of a weird thing because, like, yeah, I see that it did finally force the hand of the PGA Tour, but I think but it was at the sacrifice of the longevity for the LIV tournament, if that makes sense. The biggest thing that LIV was saying in the very beginning of all of this was that the different, because everyone was like, well, what makes you different than the PGA Tour? Are you just going to be another tour like the DP or the Asian or whatever? Like, what makes you different? Like, why should people tune in? And their thing was, the biggest thing was the fact that they had teams. It was team golf. We're introducing the world of teams to golf, which is, unheard of. You got, the only team golf you have is the Ryder Cup. That's pretty much it. There's like 2-man teams at that other golf tournament, that PGA tournament. But for the most part, there's no teams. You know what I mean? There's pairings or whatever. And that was like, that's our biggest thing. Well, that was where LIV Golf went wrong. Not because they wanted to lean in on the teams aspect, but they just didn't do it right. I actually think LIV Golf could have been successful. It could have appealed to everybody, including the older generation of golf fans, had they went after this a little bit differently. What I would have done and how I would have set this up, if I'm LIV and I'm the PIF and I'm everybody in the boardroom and we're setting this thing up, how are we going to make this work? I'm all cool with the golf but louder thing. Let's have the music. Let's have the more relaxed atmosphere. First things first, there is no individual players. It's teams only. That's the biggest thing that I think hurt LIV. LIV was like, we want to do teams, but we also want to keep the individual because we're scared that nobody will go all in on the teams, right? It was sort of a half in, half out situation. They were like, well, this has never been done before, and what if nobody likes it? So let's keep the individual aspect for the people who aren't interested in the teams. Well, the problem with that is because you've done that, it really makes the team thing irrelevant because it exists. Let's just face it. Golf is often an individual sport. Like, it's not naturally a team thing. So in my opinion, it should have been teams only. The second thing that they did wrong with this is they created these sort of teams out of thin air. It was all very like synthetic. It was very kind of fake, and you could tell that they were trying to act like these teams have existed for 100 years, like the PGA Tour. Like the thing that LIV had to fight against with the PGA Tour was legacy. The PGA Tour has a legacy of just years and years and years of great golfers and great stories and these moments that you can't write. They have to write themselves, as so many other sports do, like the NFL does and hockey, everything does. So LIV had none of that because it's brand new. I mean, it's just part of it. It has to create that. But the problem is that it felt like the announcers and everybody there was trying to sort of create it on its own. They weren't trying to let it naturally happen. Like Bryson DeChambeau wins, or like this remarkable historical moment. Bryson wins the tournament. It's like, you're kind of overselling it. Does that make sense? You're overselling it. Another thing was the teams. The teams were, like I said, synthetic. They were made up. They're not real. if I were to go back and do it again, if I were to say, listen, I'm starting LIV, I'm with PIF, I would have done it this way. First things first, the LIV tournament would be separate of the PGA tournament. So the LIV tour would start after the FedEx Cup finishes. So it would be the end of August, and it would go from the end of August to just before the end of the year. Probably you could say like we're going to go August to December. Because now you're not competing with the PGA Tour. You're not competing with the majors. This is now in addition to what the PGA offers. It's kind of like the NFL. You get these sort of weird, you get like the UFL or AFL, Canadian League, all these different leagues that want to offer more football. They tend to do it, after the NFL season. They've had more success by doing it that way because it's just like, hey, look, more football. Yay. And it would be only teams, okay? And then from there, the teams would be franchises, okay? So, in other words, you're not creating fake teams and you're not creating these sort of fake captains where it's like, well, we just take these legacy players like Bubba Watson and Phil and Bryson and all these other guys, and we're just going to make them captains because they happen to be really good players. It's like, that doesn't really make any sense. It's like, whatever. I remember watching a video of who was it? I'm having a brain fart right now, which is crazy. Brooks Koepka. I don't know why his name was evading me right there. I'm sorry. But like Brooks Koepka just came to LIV. He was made a captain. And you see him sitting around the table with his team. They're having their first team meeting. And honestly, it literally looked like an awkward, like it almost looked staged. Like they're like, hey, everybody sit at this round table and pretend to have a meeting. And it literally just looked like everybody was just sitting there like casually talking. It didn't really look like a team meeting. And then on top of that, you're just kind of wondering like, what the hell are they talking about? Like, what? Go out there and play well, guys. You know what I mean? Like, what's the purpose of the team meeting? What are they saying? What were they discussing? Were they, are we going to go at it? We're going to play aggressive. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it felt weird. It was laughable. And it was hard to get past that. And so what I would say is create franchise opportunities much like a professional sports league like the NFL or the NHL or whatever, right? And what would be fun about this is you go find, you create a package, okay? You say, listen, you're going to have 4 players, and, this is what we think it's going to cost. This is the franchise fees you pay into it. And then you could pick a home course, right? So let's just say like Atlanta, for instance. You could have like, I'm going to say this because it's silly, but like the Atlanta Thrashers, whatever. The Thrashers were a hockey team in Atlanta. But let's just say like the franchise for the LIV Tour in Atlanta was the Atlanta Thrashers. And their home golf course was, well, pick one, right? It could be anything. You just find a home course that's, meets the criteria. And that's your home course, okay? All right. That course is now on the schedule for the LIV Tour. And, you go out there and you seek out these franchises. You try to buy them. Maybe the PIF creates them on their own, right? Like the Saudis have connections in the United States, right? They've got deep pockets in the United States. Wouldn't be hard to get some guys on board to spend the money to create a local, get it going, right? Now you have this aspect of like, this is a real team. It's kind of like a state within a country, right? The country's LIV. The state is the team. The team has got a franchise. It's got an owner. It's got a general manager. Now you open up the idea of, okay, now we could do recruiting. Well, where can we recruit from? Well, we could recruit from college. We could recruit from, the PGA, right? You could say, since this doesn't interfere with the PGA Tour season, it's not interfering with their eyeballs. Now you could work with the PGA and make this part of it. Hey, we're the team. We're starting a team golf league, just like Tiger Woods with his arena golf, right? It's separate of the PGA. It wraps up before the season really kicks off, so it's not a problem. You could say, all right, the Atlanta Thrashers golf team we went out and we recruited, some guys from the PGA. And what might be fun to keep it interesting is you might say, hey, look, let's have salary caps, right? So now you could have this aspect of golf where it's like, well, it doesn't really matter if you win or lose. You're going to get paid. However, there may be performance bonuses, right? You might draft it in the contract where the franchise gets a bigger winning percentage for winning the tournament, and then they have to give up a percentage of that to the players, right? So now you might say, when the Atlanta Thrashers are playing at their home golf course, the purse is $400 million. Cool. Well, the winners get $4 million, or not $400 million. Let's just say the purse is however much, but the winning team gets $4 million, right? So the franchise takes in that money, and now it's written into the books that the players get a percentage of that. Maybe they get 25%, whatever. Doesn't matter. But they're still getting paid a salary throughout the year anyway. Plus they get to have their own sponsorships. That's separate. They can do whatever they want. And then the franchise can have their own sponsorships. So you see all these opportunities to make money, to have the revenue steady, right? You're not competing with the PGA. It's full team aspect. The teams are real. They're franchised. They're not some bullshit. They go out, they compete. I think the 3-game thing is fine. I don't like the shotgun start personally. I think it would be better. And I think they could have a fun way to change up the tournaments. Like you could have more head-to-head matches, right? Maybe that's the format where it's a point system. It's not a stroke system. It's more like a Stableford or something. You could play. My point is, like, you could play around with it. You could be different enough where it's exciting and it's fun. It's it feels more like a break for the guys. These PGA pros, they come off the league. It allows them to keep practicing, playing golf, making good money. I don't know, but that's my point. Like, that was the biggest problem for LIV was, one, you went right after the PGA. You didn't try to work with them. And then on top of that, you were running your season alongside them. I mean, for crying out loud, LIV Golf went to Michigan for the first time, I think, last year. Yeah. And that tournament was the same week as the FedEx Cup tournament. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, are you really trying to compete with the FedEx Cup tournament? Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, that would be like if the NFL was trying to have have a big deal during the Stanley Cup Finals. Like, that would be a horrible idea. You know what I mean? So, I mean, really, that's not a good example because it's two different sports, but you get what I'm saying. Like, that's a horrible thing to do. And so they were set up for failure from the rip. And the team thing didn't work. I think what I just said would have been a much better option for them, much better opportunity. And it would have changed everything. I actually think that there's an opportunity for LIV to exist still with that sort of setup. It would be interesting to see, like, if the powers that be, they've got this new board that's separate now. It would be interesting if they reached out to the PGA and said, hey, let's figure out a way to coexist. Can we maybe go all team post PGA season, right? Maybe they keep the stupid team names like Crushers and all that stuff, but it's like, yeah, that's fine. We'll keep the setup as it is, but we'll go teams only post PGA season. I still think it would be much better if they had the franchises, have the recruiting, have the sort of trade deals where it's like we're trading, Brooks Koepka's playing for us this year, but we're trading him out for this other guy. Maybe have salary caps, which kind of keeps things balanced and interesting, where it's like, each franchise can only spend, $20 million or whatever, $10 million on players for 4 players for the seat on their contract period. Their contract could be for like 3 years, 4-year contracts, whatever. It'd be interesting to see what that would look like. But you can have all that. That would create some drama and some interesting things. It would bring that whole team aspect of golf to golf, which is what they were trying to do, which they failed at miserably. But yeah, there it is. And also too, I go back to what I've started this off with, which is LIV was an opportunity it was a different opportunity for different people. For Norm, it was to go after the PGA. For LIV, it was to get into the world of golf, right? They weren't in it. They couldn't get in it. But what happened halfway through? When the dust settled on all this, the news came out that the PIF and the PGA met at a table and now are allowing the PIF to be sponsors. They're giving money to the PGA Tour. The PIF, the Saudi Arabians, got what they wanted, and they got their in at the PGA. Because what Jay Monahan said was, if I can't beat them, let them join us, right? We can't crush them. Let them into our inner circle. We'll take their money. Oh, suddenly the blood money was no longer a big thing. It was no longer a big deal. I will say this: the biggest thing we got out of the LIV Golf PGA Golf war was it just showed you how hypocritical everybody is in this world, especially the world of sports. Listen, money talks, bullshit walks. And at the end of the day, the PGA Tour is like, we would love to have that PIF money. And they went after it. They got it. And the Saudis got what they wanted. It was only a matter of time after that the LIV Golf thing would go away. Why? LIV Golf's not making any money. The LIV Golf couldn't get a good broadcast deal. That's another thing. I think personally, I think LIV Golf should have lived on YouTube. I watched more LIV Golf when it was on YouTube than when it went to cable. I don't have cable. I hate cable. I get cable for one reason and one reason only: college football. That is it. So when LIV Golf left, it used to air on YouTube in the very beginning. And they should have stayed there. They should have leaned into that. Like I said earlier in this podcast, YouTube golf is skyrocketing. What is LIV? LIV is louder. It's much more energetic. It's more young. It's more set up for like the gamers. It's got all the fancy graphics. It's set up for the guys who are watching YouTube golf. Perfect. They should have stayed there. I know the sponsorships don't like that, but the eyeballs were there, because the beautiful thing about YouTube is it tracks your viewership. They were getting millions of views on their golf tournament days. So that was their mistake there too. But it was only a matter of time. They couldn't get a good broadcast deal. They couldn't really find a way to make it profitable. The PIF dumped billions into it. The PIF got into the PGA. They're in there now. To whatever degree that looks like, I don't know the details of it. But there it is. It's done. And when all the dust settled on all that, what happened? Well, the biggest thing is the players finally got a little bit of leverage, which was good. Caused the change of the PGA, which was good. But overall, did golf really change? No, I don't think so. I think the PGA Tour is still the same as it ever was. Oh, we got elevated events now. Okay, well, that's for the players. It's not for us, right? It just means more money, more opportunity for them. But for the most part, nothing really changed. You know, PGA guys aren't really getting crazy. In fact, there was an article that came out the other day about the Waste Management Tour, which is probably the closest thing you'll ever get for our PGA Tour event to look like LIV. And they were talking about how kind of off the rails it's become, with beers being thrown and people acting crazy. And that's sort of, it's kind of the stigma around the Waste Management tournament now is like it's a frat party, right? And there's a lot of people who are like, oh, we don't like that. It's bad optics for the PGA Tour. But it's like, well, you say that, but everybody shows up and they pack those stadiums and everybody loves it and everybody has a good time, right? You know, for the fact that, you know, people gave LIV a hard time, said they're always like, nobody watches LIV, nobody cares. It simply wasn't true. You could tell, especially in countries, in tournaments outside the United States, they had great viewership. And those hospitality suites were packed. The Michigan tournament, despite being the same week as the FedEx Cup, did pretty well. Had a great turnout. So the criticism that nobody watched is just not true. It's not valid. But they couldn't. The broadcast deal was that you had the sanctions against players and then you had the media propaganda machine. The world ranking points were not allowed. That was a nail in the coffin for him right then and there. And then the broadcast, the failure to get a good broadcast. The Golf Channel wasn't going to do anything. Golf Channel wouldn't touch it. Of course they wouldn't touch it because the PGA would be like, bye. You ain't gonna talk about us anymore. And then that would be the end of the Golf Channel. So it goes to show you the one thing about the LIV Golf PGA thing, shows that everybody who's a hypocrite, but it also just showed you how much absolute control the PGA Tour has over the golf world. And that despite the fact that they don't have all the money in the world, they're still a monster. And it's a monster that I just don't think can be broken. Just like the NFL. You're never going to replace the NFL ever. And you're never going to replace the PGA Tour. So I think the thing for LIV, and I think going forward for the golf world, is they're going to have to find a way to work with the PGA and not against the PGA. But it looks like at this moment LIV is gone. I think it's unfortunate. I'm not worried about the players. Everyone's like, what's going to happen to the players? Well, Bryson will find a way back to the tour. So will so many of the other really good players. I think it would be interesting I think the Champions Tour would absolutely let Phil come play. The PGA Tour the Champions Tour needs all the help they can get. For those of you who don't know, that's basically the senior tour. They're starting to get some faces on that tour. It's helping a little bit, but it does not have the eyeballs like the PGA Tour has. So if they could get Phil over there, I think they would love that. The question is, does Phil want to go play there? He might. I don't know. He's made his money. He may be like, time to go walk off into the sunset and call it a day. He's not playing golf right now. He's not, I don't know if that's because of the situation with LIV or not, but he said it's for his health or his family situation, whatever. But the players will be fine. I think if you're a younger player, I think if you went right from college to the LIV or something like that, I think you're going to have a bit of a struggle. I can see the PGA Tour being like, listen, if you want to come play on this tour, you're going to have to claw your way back. Go back to Q school, go back to the Corn Ferry, whatever, get to the DP, go wherever you can go, but you're not going to play here. You're going to have to earn your way back. That's fair, I suppose. Jay Monahan really screwed the pooch on that. I think he went too far. He was too aggressive. Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, the PGA Tour was never going to go away. The LIV Tour was never going to replace the PGA Tour. I know the PGA Tour was like, we're going to get royally screwed by this, so we got to go scorched earth and ban people, but I don't think they had to do that. I think they could have found a way to kind of sort of like, yeah, you can play on both tours if you want. But the PGA Tour didn't want that. They wanted dead, just absolute, complete, allegiance to the PGA Tour. That's why they leaned into Rory, because Rory was so, aligned with the PGA, hated LIV, would always talk shit about LIV. To his detriment. He found out real hard that you never align yourself with corporations, because the PGA Tour kind of used him as a puppet for that whole war, and then basically kind of bit him there in the end when he was wanting some help or bail out. He didn't get it. It's like, yeah, buddy, because at the end of the day, the PGA Tour used you and you got made to look like a fool. I like Rory, but he made some really bad decisions during that time. I think he kind of acted kind of silly. He's not doing it really anymore, which is good. But, yeah, the whole thing was a mess. It didn't have to be, but here we are in a world where money controls everything, and the PGA was clutching their pearls and freaked out that they were going to lose a huge market share in golf, lose their monopoly, as Greg Norman would call it. It's clear that they did. They had it. For a short minute there, they were losing it, but they're back at it again, and I have a feeling that once LIV Golf goes away, it'll be business as usual for the PGA Tour, and the players are just going to have to deal with it, and you're either going to like it or you can go get a regular job like the rest of us. So on that note, wanted to talk about that. We've spoken about LIV Golf. We talk sports on this podcast as much as we can. I love sports, prefer it over politics, but we had some LIV Golf conversations in the past. We had it on the Golf King podcast, which doesn't exist anymore. If I could find those, I might put them up as bonus episodes. But all in all, what was inevitable is happening. The PGA Tour won. The PGA Tour cannot be destroyed. It is a monster that cannot be destroyed and cannot be fed. They will always be the kings. And on that note, folks, thank you so much for listening. If you hung around this long and listened to me ramble on about golf for an hour and 20 minutes, boy, I really am thankful for that. And if you like the podcast, go and review it wherever you listen to your podcast. Give us 5 stars. Share it with your friends and family. We appreciate it. It's free. It costs you nothing, but it means the world to me. Thank you so much, guys. And on that note, we will be back here soon to talk about whatever else is going on in the world. Go out there and have fun. Go touch grass. See you guys.